أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم. تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي للأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشرهم بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم ولمسنكم منا عذاب عليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما ليعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قوم من بعد من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتي من رسول إلا كان به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل السابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منها ومطاء إلهي. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتي من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها مؤرزين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تاكلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانة فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمر ننكس في الخلق أفلا يأكلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. واتخذوا من دونه آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم يروا الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأحزر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم؟ بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وظل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العسام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبت وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توضئني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسم قراضئا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد هاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من أمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرعت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادهم من البلاء أقلت وكم من إثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أحلا له نشرت. اللهم أضم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجحالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رعوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منقسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مضئنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي حمني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من توى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضئا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تعبد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادها، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعا، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعا، وأشارت باستغفارك مضئنا. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاء قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وعن انتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستقيم. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج، وأبكي لعليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وحبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء أفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأسرقن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولو نادئنك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين. يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين، أفتراق سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتك، وذاك تعمى عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيجا مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تعلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحركه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعظيم بجاحدك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وهكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت، وكل ذنب أذنبت، وكل قبيح أسررت، وكل جحل أملته كتمته أو أعلنت، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته، أو إحسان فضلته، أو بر نشرته، أو رزق بسطته، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطاء تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورة، وبخدمتك موسولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي، يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جواره، واشدد على العزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرها إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسري إليك في الباردين، وأشتاك إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن أبيدك نسيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجهودك، واعتف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك مطيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بإبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاهه المقام يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا آل من لا يؤلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أحلو وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا
जिन आल मोहम्मद सलवात मजबूर है नाचार है मर्जी खुदा से बाई नहीं जी उठने का फरियादो बुका से के करिए सुकन शाह के आंसू हुए जारी छाती से लिपट बाई के ज़ैनब ये पुकारी आई सैयदे मजलूम बहन हो गई वारी मैं जाने नहीं देने की फिरवाओ सवारी तब जाइयो जब जिसे गुजर जाएगी ज़ैनब हजरत ने कमर बांधी तो मर जाएगी ज़ैनब दुखियारी हूँ भाई ना मेरी आस को तोड़ो सदके गई बहना को न परदेश में छोड़ो पगश्ता जमाना हो गए तुम तो न छोड़ो मुझसे तो न फरमाओ के हाथों को न जोड़ो मिन्नत भी करूंगी मैं कदम पर भी गिरूंगी नंगे मगर कैद में दर दर ना फिरूंगी नाना है न बाबा है न माँ जुल्म की मारी किस पर मुझे छोड़ के जाते हो मैं वारी फरमाते थे सब बहनों में तू है मुझे प्यारी समझो ना बहन मुझको लौंडी हूँ तुम्हारी दुनिया में रहे लाख बरस आप सलामत मैं जानती हूँ ऐ मेरे माँ बाप सलामत ऐ भाई जा जाओगे मैं साथ चलूंगी जंगल में रहो घर का कभी नाम न लूंगी तलवारों में भी पास से हरगिज न टलूंगी पर आतिशे फुरकत से तुम्हारे न जलूंगी आदा की लड़ाई से न डर जाएगी ज़ैनब कटवा के गलाते गसे मर जाएगी ज़ैनब अल-फातिहा मा सलवात
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Sayyid Shabbir, Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Al-Fatiha is requested for the Isala Sawab of Marhumin listed on the screen and for all Marhumin Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman. Ayyama Yujib is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Ayyam Fatimiyya program. The Ayyam Fatimiyya program has been scheduled for 3 nights starting Thursday, January 14th till Saturday, January 16th. The program will start at 7:30 p.m. with Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani discussing the following topic: Lady Fatima, salawatullahi alayha, the ideal exemplar for the 21st century at home, work and life. We hope to see you all here inshallah starting this coming Thursday. Khums Ijaza. We wish to inform you that we continue to have official authorization to collect Khums dues to be used fully towards the running and maintenance of Masjid al-Hayy. You may fulfill your obligated religious dues by generously supporting Masjid al-Hayy and continue spreading the blessed benefits to the Orlando community. To remit your khums towards the upkeep and maintenance of the masjid, please contact Brother Murtaza Kareem at finance@masjidalhayy.org or visit the link on the screen. Inshallah, at this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir to come recite tonight's majlis. Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
If you could please recite the Fatiha for the soul of Marhum Sajjad Abdul Razak Jafar and for your Marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawm ad-din. Iyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. As-sirat al-mustaqim. غير المغضوب. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجلسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, members of the Jafar, Abdul Hussein, Manikia, Mukhi, Shirazi, Bakri families, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Death, a concept which in modern societies we don't like to discuss. We try to brush it under the rug. Whether that's in Japan or America or Canada or South Korea, modern societies don't like to speak about death. And the reason is because it's a reality which is unbearable by so many. What does death mean? Is it annihilation? Is death the end? Whereas particularly when we look at this world in which we exist, particularly coming right out of 2020, congratulations to you who made it on the other side. Who knows how many days we have? Who knows how many weeks we have? Who knows how many years we have? Who knows how much time we have? And this era and time in which we exist in, this slice of time, is such a pertinent reminder of how to really live our lives. So the question I begin with for you and I is, how will you be remembered? You see, the ancient Greeks had a saying 2,000 years ago, and that saying was memento mori. They would always repeat it. They would say memento mori under every moment in the day and the night throughout times. What did this saying mean? Memento meant remember. Mori, your mortality. Remember your death. You will find this being very similar to Islamic ideology, to Islamic philosophy, to Islamic concepts. Why remember death? Is remembering death something morbid? Is remembering death something negative? Is remembering death something that somebody has a problem if they're trying to remember death? No. What the ancients had recognized, as well as what Islam had recognized and other major religions of the world, is when one looks death in the eye, when one looks straight at death at that moment and remembers it, then and only then are we able to truly live. You realize that those people who I knew and I lived with, they're no longer here with me anymore. Those people, for example, who I grew up with, those family members that I had, my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, whoever it may be, they were once with me, they are no longer with me. So it makes you and forces you to realize that this moment that we have right now is the only moment that we have. And there is no guarantee. Rasulullah says, Mutu qabla an tamutu. Die before you die. Ya Rasulullah. Die. Death I understand. I understand the second death. Die before you die. As in, the physical body will perish. I will be buried into the ground. This may become dust. I understand that death. But what is the first death you are referring to? Mutu qabla an tamutu. You know, this is an amazing line from Rasulullah, which non-Muslims have appreciated more than Muslims. You will find many authors, many people who are not Muslim have analyzed this line from Rasulullah. That why did he say this line? Why did the Prophet of Islam say, mutu an qabla an tamutu. And they've written much on this concept. But Rasulullah was asked, what is that first death that you're talking about? The second is the death of the body, the perishing of the body. What's the first one? And the mufassirin and the commentators, muhaddithin, on this say, it's the death of the ego. When we die, what really dies? When we remain on this earth, what remains? You will find that the knowledge, the wisdom that we left behind, the good work that we left behind, that's all that remains. When you understand this, you begin to truly live. You and I, we go to the highest court in the land. You saw everything that happened yesterday in the nation's capital. It's just a stone's throw away from there. You go to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. When you go to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, etched in stone, you will find the great lawgivers of American society. No, of world society. That the founders of the United States thought these people have left an indelible mark on society and civilization. Who are these people? The likes of Hammurabi, the greatest lawgivers in history. Hammurabi, Moses and the Ten Commandments. You will find Napoleon and others. Amongst that, etched into the stone till this day, you will find the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa. Because the court understood that this is one of the greatest lawgivers in history, period. In fact, CARE tried to have it removed some decades ago, but they were unsuccessful. Because the court said, this is out of respect of this man and his laws that he's given to society. Now, the question that comes here for you and I is, we may not be able to have a legacy like Muhammad Arabi. We may not be able to have a legacy where in a period of 23 years we changed the entire, Zahiri 23 years, we changed the entire paradigm of human civilization. But we can do something. So the question I ask myself, the question I ask you, and the question I ask society is, what's our legacy? How will I be remembered? How will you be remembered? You know, just earlier, one of my favorite stories about realizing, Islam says, knowledge is the lost property of a mu'min. You must get it from wherever you receive it. If it's wisdom, it's wisdom. In fact, Rasulullah, how would he let the POWs go? You know, the prisoners of war, when a battle happened between Muslims and others, there were certain enemies, they were captured. And it happened on the other side as well. Rasulullah would say, you have your freedom if you just teach a few Muslims to read and write. Was that person teaching fiqh? Was that person who's not a Muslim teaching usul? What is that person teaching? He was teaching something that was secular by our standards. That is the status of ilm. We somehow have said that ilm or knowledge in Islam is only religious. Whereas Islam sought no distinction. Rather, ilm, knowledge is either qurbatan ilallah or not. It either takes me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. That's why for 700 years Muslim scientists led the world. What's happening today? When that distinction happened, the downfall happened. Nonetheless, the question I ask you and I ask myself is, what is our legacy? We are here tonight to commemorate a beloved member of our community, of our families, of so many loved ones here. You can see the attendance yourself. Marhum Sajjad Bhai, Abdul Razak Jafar, someone who is close to your hearts. You see, in every person's legacy, in every person's life, in every person's story, there's a message for you and I, a story. Why are we as individuals so encapsulated by memoirs, by biographies, by autobiography, by history? Why do we read? You know, our former president released his memoir of his first 4 years in office. Bestseller, right off the bat. Why are we so engrossed? Why do we want to learn? Why do we want to see about other people? Because we ask the question fundamentally, what is it in this person's life that I can learn? Or, what is it about this person's life that I see in myself? And at that point, it's a point of reflection. You see, our stories aren't that different. But do we reflect on making this world a better place? Therefore, I want to begin and understand that when we commemorate an individual like Sajjad Bhai, who was a father, but also a son, but also a husband, but also a grandfather, what does that mean for me? In light of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam's teachings, the Holy Prophet was a father as well. The Holy Prophet was a grandfather as well. Amir al-Mu'mineen was a father as well. And all of those different elements of it. How am I living as a father? I begin with the verse that I started with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran al-Majid wal-Furqan al-Hamid. Please pay very close attention to this. He says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. This verse, by the way, it comes in some form with one word or two words replaced here and there, not once, not twice, not thrice, 5 times in the Quran al-Majid wal-Furqan al-Hamid. In Surah 2, in Surah 4, in Surah 6, in Surah 17, and Surah 31. Surah Baqarah, Surah Nisa, Surah An'am, Surah Isra, and Surah Luqman. The same verse. Ya Allah, why are you giving me the same verse 5 times? Because the message is important. Allah says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. First part of the verse. He says, I command you to not associate anyone with me. Allah is saying, do not associate anyone with me. God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what does He say in the second point? The second part of the verse. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And do good to your parents. You see, ihsan, we translate it as good in English. But ihsan is a beautiful word. Ihsan's root word, husn, it is the root word at the same time it means good, at the same time it means beauty, at the same time it means husn. Ihsan. Husn, root word. The same root word as Hussein. Hussein means little beauty, or little virtue, or little good. That root word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, what does it mean to do good? That's a question that we must answer. But the nature of this verse, according to Mufassirin of the Quran, they say, it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, in the first part, I ordain and I command unto you not to associate anyone with me, and do good to your parents. It is as if Allah is saying, if I were to allow you to worship anyone except me, it would be your parents. That's the emphasis. That's the focus. That's the importance on this. And in Surah Isra, in this part that I'm reciting, He continues and says, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. Do not even say uff to them. And further He goes, وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Why? You know, we many times, especially Ayyam Fatimiyya are coming, we talk about mothers, and it's very important, and we need to talk immensely about mothers. But sometimes we don't talk about fathers. We don't talk about fatherhood, and its importance, its responsibility, and how important it is. You know, there's a book I recommend all the parents to read. It's called, especially those with daughters, it's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. In fact, it argues that the main, most important person in a daughter's life is the father, period. Period. That's the impact. That's the influence. That's the level of magnitude, the importance of the father being there. Just the presence. And on top of that, other things that you can actually implement. For example, teaching humility. For example, teaching confidence. All of these things come from the presence of the father. You know, there's a moment in time we're told, you know, the position. Numerous ahadith on this. I will just share a story, a narration with you. We're told one of the scholars in this holy city of Najaf, Sheikh Baqir al-Kadhimi, he narrates, an authentic scholar, a reliable scholar, and a renowned scholar a few decades ago. He said one of the truthful, honest, sincere, virtuous barbers of Najaf. You know, you don't have to be a big scholar with a turban in order to be a close person, an awliya, or a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not necessary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden His friends amongst the people. At that moment in time, this scholar says there was a barber who used to look after his father. He said, in his dars, he's saying, I want to narrate this to you. He said, I used to look after my father every single day. In fact, I would even bring him the water that he needs to use in the restroom. He had gotten old. I would look after everything for my father. He said, and I would do this every day of the week, except one day, Wednesdays. Wednesdays I would go to Masjid al-Sahla for the ziyarah of Imam Zaman. He said, that day I would leave. But otherwise, every single time I would help my father. He says, Wednesday came. I set out for my journey. I did not get even one moment that day to look after my father. I didn't get a moment. He said, I set out in the middle of the night. It had gone night. It had become dark. I set out. You know, it's not the airplane and train and car time. You go on camelback. Or you go horse or donkey or whatever it is, the mule. So he set out. When he set out, at that point in time, he says, I had gotten 1/3 of the way there. 1/3 of the way there. When I had gotten 1/3 of the way there, I saw an Arab man in the middle of the desert who was approaching me. I said, for sure he's coming to loot me. For sure he's coming to take my property, which is very common, looting in the middle of the desert. It was lawless, no man's land. He said, at that point in time, I understood this was the time I'm going to get robbed. The man comes towards me, he says, have you eaten? He says, no, I don't have anything to eat. The Arab man looked back at him sternly, he says, check your pocket. This barber, he says, he puts his hand in his pocket. He says, I realized I had some raisins in my pocket. These raisins were raisins I had bought for my son, to give my son. I had forgotten about them. I said, I did not realize they were there. I forgot they were there. He said, where are you heading to? The Arab man said, where are you heading towards? He says, I'm going towards Masjid al-Sahla. He said, very well. The Arab man looked at him and he says, I command unto you, look after your father. Look after your father. Look after your father. And he disappeared in the middle of the desert. He said, I continued on my journey, I didn't realize. I went, Masjid al-Sahla, I came back, didn't realize. He said, I went to the scholars and I explained to them what happened. They said, you met an Arab Bedouin in the middle of the desert and he didn't loot you, he didn't rob you, and you were by yourself. He told you you had something in your pocket. It still didn't register for you. He told you 3 times, your father, your father, your father, you didn't realize. He said, that was the Imam of your time. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. We think the Imam comes and visits the one with the big turban, the big scholar, the big alim. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. He said, from that moment in time, I did not neglect the right of my father, even on Wednesdays. I didn't go to Masjid Sahla. I dedicated all my time. You see, sometimes people go to the Hawza, by the way, it's another time for that. But when they go, the scholars there themselves, one of the first questions they ask, do you have parents? Because sometimes it's better to look after your parents who are elderly than to even go to the Hawza. Does that mean there's something wrong with the Hawza? No, no, no. It means that that's the importance of their position. I'm told the marhum had 6 children. 6 lives, 6 families. What's our legacy? It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have children, to be granted children in this way. And it's those fathers who make the sacrifices. The moment a child is born, a father's life changes completely. In ways we sometimes don't realize, in ways we sometimes don't celebrate, in ways we sometimes don't commemorate. And you know, by the way, there's no school for being a father. If you know of one, let me know. You're learning on the fly. You're learning, you're running, you're doing work. You're trying to learn all of the elements of being a father. And that's kudos and credit to each and every one of those who are fathers here. There's no school. Sometimes people are in their early 20s having children, learning along the way. But if love is there, if compassion is there, you'll be astonished at what happens. This relationship of parents is the closest relationship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us on this earth to understand His rahmah, His mercy. Because they are reflections of that mercy. Darwin was willing to drain his entire thesis of evolution because he couldn't explain one thing. Do you know what that was? He was saying, I am willing to drain my entire theory of evolution into the river. I cannot explain this one concept because I'm talking about survival of the fittest. Do you know what that one concept was? The altruism of parents. Altruism, selfless giving. He says, I cannot explain why a parent looks after a child without expecting anything in return. It defeats the strongest survive theory, or survival of the fittest. That's how powerful the love of a parent is. That's how magnanimous the love of a parent is. You know, Sajjad Bhai was someone who loved to help people. A lesson for you and I within this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has left such a merit for helping others that you and I cannot imagine. The barakah of helping others, especially I say this in this time, in 2020, 2021, I know people, you may know people as well, locally and abroad, they've had to cut back a meal. They're struggling, they're selling things. It's a difficult time. Help others. You will get blessings in your life. You will get barakah in your life. Allama Qadi Tabatabai, the mentor of Allama Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan, and the relative. He was a person who was Sahib Karamat. You know what he would do? These people don't become of such a stature without any coincidence. It's actually thoughtful. How? He would go to the bazaar and he would go to the grocer. And he would pick up lettuce. He would buy lettuce. Lettuce, humble food. Which is very healthy for you, by the way. So he would get this lettuce. He was going, one of the scholars narrates, I was looking at Allama Qadi at the bazaar buying lettuce from this grocer. He says, typically when we go and buy products and produce, we look at which one's good, which one's fresh, which one's nice. He was looking at all the withered away, staling lettuce, the one that was going bad. And on top of that, people wanted the lettuce that had the smaller leaves, it was easier to eat. He was looking at the ones with big leaves, the ones that were very hard. He got a few of them, said, can you weigh this for me? The man weighed it, and he gave him the money. Allama Qadi. At that point in time, the student was waiting. The student was a scholar himself. He said he was waiting for him to go away. When he left the shop, he went to Allama Qadi. Salamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. He said, Allama Qadi, can I ask you what I just saw? He said, what? He said, you went to the bazaar, you bought lettuce. He says, you bought the one that was withering away, that was going old, that was going bad. And you bought the one that had large leaves, the ones that were hard. You didn't buy the easy ones, the simple ones, the small ones that were softer. Why? He said, I tell you this, don't tell anyone. This is between me and him. But you saw this, you notice this, you're a student. He said, this man is in dire need. He's in abject poverty. He's going through a very difficult time. He said, I wanted to help him. But 2 points. He said, number one, I didn't want to give him money straight away to reduce his honor and dignity. I didn't want him to look bad. I didn't want him to feel bad. So I didn't want to just give him money straight away, number one. Number two, I also didn't want him to stop working. He was working, and he was working hard. He said, I wanted to encourage him. If I just gave him money like that, maybe he'll just say, oh, I'll sit home. But he was striving. He was working hard. I wanted to support him. I wanted to encourage him. I say this very importantly because, sometimes in our world, we paint the poor class in society with a broad brush. I invite you to read another book. It's called Poor Economics by the Nobel laureates at MIT, the husband and wife, Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo. They said one of the biggest mistakes, and I tell you to take this to wherever you do charity work, in India or East Africa or locally, one of the biggest mistakes that we do when we try to solve poverty is we paint all of those who are poor with a broad brush, they say in the book. We say all poor people are poor because they're lazy, because they're unmotivated, because they're X, Y, and Z. He said we would not paint any other class, the middle class, the upper class, with a broad brush like this. In fact, if you look at the research, you will find some more people are more resourceful than other classes of society because they have to make the ends meet somehow. The reality of the matter is, what are we doing for others? Are you and I helping others? Are we doing what Allama Qadi did? Are we doing what Sajjad Bhai did? Are we doing what others did? Are we doing what the Ahlul Bayt did? Imam Hassan and his Dastakhan, which you know. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and his Dastakhan. Are we doing that? Are we doing that or not? And the question is, if we are, how can we expand it? And if we're not, how can we start it? Furthermore, I'm told the marhum enjoyed feeding others. Do you know the fadila of this? Do you know the merit of this? Do you know the importance of this? We're told there's a moment in time, first food. Do you know how much value food has in Islam? The Holy Prophet is sitting with some of his companions, some bread comes in front of him. When some bread comes in front of Rasulullah, he says, oh my companions, do you know the value of bread? He says, when bread is formed and made, it is as if all the things from the earth to the arsh of Allah conspire to make the bread. They all come together to make the bread. He said, I want to tell you something. Rasulullah saying to his companions, I want to tell you something. He says, what? He says, I want to tell, they say, Ya Rasulullah, please tell us, what is it that you want to tell us? He says, Nabi, before me there was a prophet, many years ago. His name was Daniel. Nabi Daniel was walking down the street when he saw a poor man. When he saw this poor man, Nabi Daniel, he gave him a piece of bread. This poor man, he was someone who saw the bread. He said, this is useless, stale bread. Who will do anything with this? He threw it back in the middle of the road. When he threw it back in the middle of the road, Nabi Daniel raised his hands towards the heaven. And he said, the position of bread, the position of bread. The narration says, Rasulullah says, after that it stopped raining on that city in that region. There was a famine and a drought that came. The sprouts, the wheat never came out after that. Until Nabi Daniel did dua, oh Allah, remove this and forgive these people for they do not know. Bread. You know, 40% of the food in America goes to waste. It breaks my heart because I've seen abject poverty in India with my own eyes. Some of you have seen it in East Africa or other parts of the world. You know, we think we have poverty. We don't have ideas. That's a legacy. Solve that problem. That is the world remember. Remember this thing. The world never remembers people for their money. Remember that. Jeff Bezos was the richest man in the world yesterday. Today he's not. Today it's Elon Musk. Tomorrow it will be somebody else. The world only remembers what Amir al-Mu'mineen said. Amir al-Mu'mineen said the world remembers those of knowledge, and what Rasulullah says, those who do good in this world. Mandela, some argue the greatest man who lived in the 20th century. What money did he have? In fact, he spent 27 years in jail fighting for freedom. The first principle is that the world remembers those who do something for others. That's the first principle of life. The world will never remember those who do things for themselves. How many people who had self-centric goals? Nobody remembered them. But those who fight for others and the betterment of other people's lives, the world remembers these individuals. The world will remember those individuals. Gandhi, for example, the world will remember these personalities. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, Qaid-e-Azam is called over there. Do you know his story? He came from a Khoja Ismaili family who converted to Ithna Ashari Shia. He was living in London. He had a Rolls Royce, a very, very nice house. He had everything that you would want in societal standards. He was very affluent. They asked him, why are you going to politics? Why are you going to start this country? What happened afterwards? I don't want to get into the politics. But they asked him a question, why do you want to do this? You have everything made in life. You're doing very well for yourself. He said, and most probably you'll fail. Most probably you'll fail. His answer is what I wanted to draw your attention to. He says, even if I fail, I can go in front of my Lord and look him in the eye, so to speak, and say, at least I tried. At least I did something. At least I tried something. What are you and I trying for? And there's a nation of almost 200 million who idolize this individual till this day. So the question I'm asking you, your journey may not be to go into politics. Your journey may not be to, for example, write books and become a scholar. But your journey may be something. What's your journey? What's my journey? That's what we need to ask ourselves. Feeding others is a beautiful legacy if you want to endeavor in that. We're told there's a time where Imam as-Sadiq is sitting with his companions and some rice comes in front of him. When this rice comes in front of him, the Imam alayhi salam says, my companions, sit with me, join me. They said, Yabna Rasulullah, they wanted to excuse themselves. They wanted to be polite. He says, if you love us, you will sit with us. If you sit with us, you will love us more. That is the sign of you loving us is sitting with us. They sat down because the Imam said, he said, when Rasulullah was on this earth in his physical presence, the same way rice had come in front of him. When this rice came in front of him, Rasulullah, he called for Salman, Abu Dhar and Miqdad. He said, come. Salman, Abu Dhar, Miqdad. Rasulullah called on them, they came. When they came, at that point in time, he says, Ya Rasulullah, they said, Ya Rasulullah, excuse us, they wanted to be polite. At that point in time, Rasulullah said, if you love us more, you will sit with us. They sat down and they began to eat. You see, the legacy of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam was to feed others, even at times if they went hungry themselves. This is the beautiful legacy of the marhum. Adopt this in your life. Continue it afterwards. Because you see, there's environments, I know in certain places, there's a kitchen in Pakistan where they feed people for 3 rupees. 3 rupees, when you do the math, it's pennies. And that also, only they take the money because they want to save face. They don't want people to be dishonored, to give free. Do you know why this lady started this kitchen there? She started it because somebody died, a lady, in the early 2000s, not very long ago. She died. She was suffering from severe famine. She had nothing to eat, and for 2 days her children were crying. And they were crying with such fervor that she killed them. Because she couldn't bear hearing her children cry because she didn't have food to feed them. She said, everyone else passed all over this story after a few days. I couldn't allow my nafs to go over and say that somebody had to kill their children because they didn't have food to eat. You know, this happened in America during the Great Depression, by the way. We'll be asked on the Day of Judgment, what did we do when Allah gave us? Every moment we're accountable for. What are we doing? It's a question for myself and for each individual to ask individually. A beautiful legacy of Marhum Sajjad Bhai, to feed others, to look after others, to care for others. And I'm drawing to a conclusion. I don't have much time, but I want to remind you of another thing. Salah. I'm told this is an individual who loves Salah and would encourage others to pray, for Fajr in particular. Having prayer rooms, it's a beautiful thing. If you can create a place in your home, it doesn't have to be a whole room, just a small place in your home. Even if you have the musalla, do you know, in Islam, if you have the musalla in your house open, as long as the musalla is there's a place for that musalla, there is rahmah from Allah descending in your home. There's rahmah. You don't need acres and acres. You don't need a lot of space. Just keep that one place. You know how small the room of Bibi Fatima az-Zahra salamullahi alayha was? And in that small room, she would always have her musalla laid out. Always. Because that's where the angels descend. Adopt this in your life and you will notice blessings in your life. Tremendous blessings, inshallah, that which there are no limits to. Salah. And I'm also told the individual, Sajjad Bhai, loved the ziyarah of Arba'een. There's one moment out Salah I want you to remember and highlight. There's a moment in time where Sayyid al-Shuhada, he loses his people, his army. When did he lose most of his force? Do you know? At the time of Salah. Prayers. He learned this from his father. Of course it was divine, but his father the same way. A man stops Amir al-Mu'mineen in Siffin. He says, Ya Ali, I have a question for you about God. He stops in the middle of the battle. His companion says, Ya Ali, you're stopping in the middle of the battle? He says, why else are we fighting them? We are fighting them to establish Tawheed. If I can't answer his question, what's the point? Amir al-Mu'mineen, this was his stand. Imam Hussein on the plains of Karbala, he said, why am I standing? I'm standing so Salah stays on this planet. If we don't pray, who's going to pray? So he has 2 of his companions at the front. They stand there, Saeed and Zuhair. Mehve namaz ran mein Saeed o Zuhair hain, the poet says. Mehve namaz ran mein Saeed o Zuhair hain. Nusrat ki is namaz mein niyat Husain hai. These 2 individuals are standing right in front of Sayyid al-Shuhada, taking the arrows on their chest while they're praying. When Imam Hussein finishes his salah, he takes their heads on his lap and he says a dua for them. What was that dua? He says, جَعَلَكَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. Allahu Akbar. May Allah make your status amongst those who made the salah qaim, who established the prayers. Ya Aba Abdullah. You could have said, make them amongst the Sabirin, make them amongst the Shakirin, make them amongst X, Y, and Z. Why did you say, make them amongst the Musallin? Because he may say, because you don't know the status of Musallin. You don't know the status of those who pray. This was Aba Abdullah, this was Sayyid al-Shuhada. You see that connection. I'm told there's a beautiful moment where Marhum was in his final days. When he's in his final days, he's in coma, but he got up the strength. And he got up, and this moved me, that's why I'm sharing this with you. And he looked at the clock, he looked at the time, he noticed it was Fajr time, he told his son, go pray. And he says, Labbaik ya Hussein. You know, that statement at that moment, at that time, in that dire situation, that's all that matters. That connection to Sayyid al-Shuhada, that connection to the Ahlul Bayt, that's all we're going to remember in our final moments. You won't remember anything else. Because if 2020 and 2021 have taught us anything, it is understanding how little we truly need, number one. And number two, I hope it's taught us what our priorities are in life. What's my focus? How will I be remembered? How will you be remembered? You know, Marhuma Sajjad Bhai wanted to go for a ziyarah of Arba'een. He was hoping gets well, inshallah, and the whole family goes. He didn't get that opportunity. But I'm sure, inshallah, he's in the vicinity of the Ahlul Bayt by the spring of Kawthar, doing the ziyarah of Aba Abdullah and the Ahlul Bayt himself. Inshallah, all of us one day will have this opportunity. But I remembered someone else who wanted to go for the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada who wasn't able to. It was a 4-year-old Sakina in Sham. She wanted to go and she did not have that opportunity. She would call out to her aunt Zainab, her mother Rabab. She said, when will we go and see my father? When will we go home? When will we go and when will we leave? You know that moment on the day of Ashura, we're told where Aba Abdullah, he's leaving for the final moments. He's leaving for the final time. When he leaves, he comes towards his horse Zul-Janah. When he comes towards his horse Zul-Janah, at that point in time, he gets on his horse Zul-Janah. When he gets on his horse Zul-Janah, who's been helping him all day and helping him take the bodies back and forth, at that point in time, he's noticing that his horse is not moving forward. When he's noticing that his horse is not moving forward at that point in time, it's as if he says to his horse, he says, O Zul-Janah, since the morning, you have been carrying bodies and I have been carrying bodies. You are tired and I am tired. You are hungry and I am hungry. This is the final time. I won't trouble you after this. It is as if the horse gestures towards its hooves, towards its feet. At that point in time, Imam Hussein looks towards his hooves of his horse. What does he see? A 4-year-old Sakina. She is holding on to the hooves of the horse. Imam hears something. What does she say? She says, O horse, O Zul-Janah, whoever has gone since the morning, they have not returned. Do not take my father to the battlefield. I beg of you, allow him to stay here. At that moment, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he gets down from his horse. When he gets down from Zul-Janah, he takes his daughter into his hands and he hugs his daughter. May Allah not show anyone this day. He is bidding his daughter final farewell for the last time. At that moment, she says, Baba, where are you going? At that point in time, Imam Hussein says, I made a promise when my childhood to my grandfather Rasulullah. At that point in time, she says, okay, Baba, but at least let me sleep on your chest one final time. At that point in time, she sleeps on the chest of Aba Abdullah, and then she wakes up startled after a few moments. At that point, Imam says, what happened, my child? She says, Baba, go towards the battlefield. I won't stop you. I won't trouble you. She says, why? He says, why? Why did you change your mind? She says, because I just saw my grandmother Fatima al-Zahra. At that point in time, Imam departed. Only Allah knows how a father departs from his daughter. It's the most difficult thing. This bond is the closest, or one of the closest that Allah has created. We are told that after the tragedy, after the calamity, one of the greatest musibahs happened. This broke my heart when I heard this musibah from the scholars of Karbala. They say when the water came after Sham-e-Ghariban, or during Sham-e-Ghariban, when some water came, the water came. Bibi Zainab filled the water in the small glasses for the children. She began to distribute it amongst the children. She brought a little water. She gave it to Sakina. Sakina, she says, my aunt Zainab, why did you give me this water first? She says, because you are the youngest. Bibi Sakina ran into the maqtal. When she ran into the maqtal, Bibi Zainab said, where are you running to? Sakina says, my aunt Zainab, you said that the the youngest get water first. My 6-month-old brother Ali Asghar, he didn't get any water. I am giving him water. Ajrukum ala Allah. एक आखिरी रिवायत जो करबला के उलमा बयान करते हैं, कहते हैं कि जब बीबी ने पानी दिया बीबी सकीना को, बीबी सकीना ने हाथ जोड़ के एक जुमला कहा बीबी आपने पानी मुझे क्यों दिया? फूफी अम्मा का बीबी क्योंकि तुम सबसे प्यासी हो। करबला के उलमा कहते हैं कि बीबी सकीना मक्तल में उतर गई, एक दूसरी जानिब चली। बीबी ज़ैनब ने कहा का इरादा है? सकीना एक लाश सरबुरीदा पे पहुंची, एक जुमला कहा आजादारो, कहा बाबा मैं पानी लाई हूं। बाबा मैं पानी लाई हूं, आपको बहुत प्यास थी। बाबा I brought you water, I finally got you water. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Ya Allah, we ask you to bless this holy gathering, to bless all those that are here. Ya Allah, remove this global pandemic from our world. Ya Allah, eliminate these new strands and strains that are forming. Ya Allah, anyone who has a haja in this night, grant them that haja. If someone is going through financial difficulty, Ya Allah, by the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, grant them success and grant them alleviation from this difficulty. Ya Allah, anyone who's ill from any illness, grant them shifa in this night. Ya Allah, allow us to learn from the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Allow us to build bonds and build connections with our families, ones that last well beyond our lifetimes. Ya Allah, allow us to serve the poor, allow us to serve our community, allow us to serve the world and humanity at large. Ya Allah, bless all those people who have lost their lives during this time for whatever reason, for whatever disease. And Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. A final request to please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for Marhum Sajjad Abdul Razak Jafar, for your Marhumin, for our Marhumin, and especially for all those who do not have a Fatiha, someone to recite a Fatiha for them in this night. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina.
Just wait. زيارة وارثة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من مضلهم موت ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الحاضي المهدي. وأشهد أن أئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرايا ديمي وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة وفالي أكبر. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بك. زيارة الكربلاء. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وأحباء، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداء، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الزكي الناصي الأمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا زت عباس، السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم الإسلام وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواصي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استخلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخي المجيب إلى طاعة الرب غير راغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل وألحقك الله بدرجتك آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس وعنيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بأرض توس، الرضا المرتضى الرازي بالكدر والكذا، مولانا علي بن الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. وفقنا الله لزيارتك يا مولا، ورزقنا الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته.